How you doing, guys? Big Mate Dan School here again today, back once again with another video in my Conquest series for you. Today we'll be taking a look through the pages of issue 45. So, what do we get in issue 45? Well, we get a squad of Space Marine Scouts. These models, you'll know from the previous 2 weeks videos, I'm not a huge fan of the heads on these models, so I'll probably be swapping them out like I've mentioned on the previous videos. But they're not bad models overall. You know, I don't want to be too much of a Dan School downer or anything. Yeah, overall they're alright models. I like the shotguns, I like the bolters, I like the combat knives, and overall I do quite like them. I like the fatigues rather than the full power armour of a Space Marine. But it's just the heads that don't do it for me. So, yeah, that's a small adjustment I can make to make me like the model. How much are these models? I don't know. I don't actually know how much these models are. I've forgotten to check before I started recording this video. So, what I'll do is I'll just put the price here, or here somewhere, when I'm doing the editing afterwards. So, I've got a feeling, I've got £15.50 in my head, but it could be way out there. There could be a £20 kit. So it's a saving, assuming they're at least £15.50. It's a saving of around £8. So it's a good saving, again. And yeah, let's crack on with the issue, shall we? So on the front cover it says, Space Marine Scouts, Scout Wargear, and choosing unit weapons in games. So this is one of the first kits, or it's actually the second kit, I think, that's come with multiple weapon options. There's been a few where you can have them holding different war gear, like the Apothecary. I think you can have him holding a bolter, or you can have him holding his reductor pistol or something. But he has both of them pieces of war gear, the Apothecary. Well, I think he does anyway. Maybe I'm wrong there. But there's the Space Marine, the Primaris Captain, that has a few weapon options, and of course the Scouts now have another weapon option. The data sheet in here shows you, and the page before the data sheet shows you just how to pick it, and what the rules are for picking the weapons in game. So, turning on to the inside page, the first page. Space Marine Scout, some lovely artwork here of an Imperial Fist Scout. It's really nice, to be fair, that artwork. One thing I find, and it's probably always been the case, as I go through the pages and display them on the screen behind me, one thing, in my opinion, in the artwork, they're depicted much nicer than the models themselves. I don't know what the issue was with the heads, but the heads, I'm just not a fan of them. So let's move on from the heads, shall we? So on the first page, we've got the Space Marine Scouts. It gives us a type, the light infantry, and the recruits. So they're not fully fledged Space Marines. They're not. They're still getting used to all the body modifications that have been done to them, the genetic enhancements that have been done to them. So rather than give them a valuable suit of power armor, what they do is they give them this, is it flak armor? I'm not sure if it's flak armor or carapace armor. It might be one of the two. It's like a half suit of power armor almost, isn't it? They give them this smaller, lighter armor to be able to fight with these guerrilla warfare tactics, really. You know, they're advanced scouts. And they use stealth tactics, anti-infantry combat, sabotage, infiltration, reconnaissance, and assassination. The battlefield role is various. Interestingly, a lot of the new Primaris stuff that's recently been put onto the market, if you like, is it the Shadow Spear box? I can't remember the name of the box, but it's the one with the Chaos Marines in, and the Primaris Marines all in the Phobos armour. The Primaris Marines in the Phobos armour, the infiltrators, I want to say, and they're basically the same. They're all in the same armour as the Reavers. Some of them have got camo cloaks and sniper rifles and stuff like that. It seems that they are now taking the battlefield role that the Scouts provided before. So whether the Scouts will be phased out with Space Marines, with the smaller Space Marines rather than the Primaris Marines, in the future, that's one thing to consider. You know, do you want to build and paint these and then have a unit that's been phased out, or you know, do you want to build and paint them because it's a different unit from your regular power armoured Space Marines? It adds a little bit of variety to the tabletop. And this is really nice. The image is a really nice Imperial Fist colour scheme, really. It's got like the Militarum green sort of pants, and then it's got the lovely yellow Imperial Fist power armour. So I might just steal this very colour scheme for my scouts when I build and paint some. Okay, on to the next page. On the first page, I'll just mention briefly, it talks about how they are recruits, neophytes, and they join the 10th Company before they become fully fledged Space Marines. On to the next page, we see scouts of different chapters here. So the Black Templar neophytes, they operate in a completely different way to most other chapters of Space Marines, or all of the chapters of Space Marines actually. So they don't have scout squads. What they have is neophytes begin the training and then they join the battle brothers of the Black Templars on the battlefield. And if a Black Templar is impressed with a particular scout, then he'll take him under his wing and guide him through more in-depth tactics and the correct way of war, and teaching him the Black Templar way of war. So that's the way the Black Templars do it. They don't just operate in scout squads like all the other chapters do. And then it talks also about wolf scouts, which are a really interesting one, because Space Wolves, the wolf scouts are actually the more experienced warriors. There's a couple of groups that you're more experienced. Well, there's quite your experienced warriors in the Space Wolves might go into any group really, but typically they either end up in the Long Fangs because they're more experienced, they're more reliable with shooting and targeting. So the Long Fangs are the heavy weapons team for the Space Wolves. So you see a lot of the Long Fangs are called Long Fangs because their fangs have grown longer because they're older, basically. And also some of them go into Wolf Scouts because they've got more experience tracking, more experience of battle. So they like to utilise those skills that they've gathered over the decades, over the centuries of battle that they've fought for the Imperium, and they put them into Wolf Scout squads. So the Space Wolves, again, just like the Black Templars, operate very differently in many ways from other Space Marine chapters. On to Scout Wargear. So on this page we get the camo cloak, it tells us. You can barely see it there, to be fair, but it's just draped over his shoulder. We get an Astartes shotgun draped across his, not draped, but hanging on his torso. He's got grenades, chainsword, and scout binoculars. Moving on to the next page, it talks in more detail about these items. So let's just pick a few out. I'm going to talk about the shotgun because I always like a shotgun. I'm not sure how effective they are in game. I'll speculate about that when we get to the data sheet. So these weapons are used to deadly effect and are particularly devastating at close range. They are lightweight and can be fired on the move with relative ease. The combat knives, so Space Marine Scouts are all trained to use combat knives. They are long blades with razor sharp edges and are wielded with great skill and dexterity. And then onto the chainsword as well. Whilst most Scouts use combat knives as their main melee weapon, Scout Sergeants may opt to use a loud and intimidating chainsword. So the chainsword's an interesting one actually, because it's not on the profile for the Scouts, that as you'll see when we get to the data sheet. But what they say is just use the combat knife stats, because it's in game. A chainsword has exactly the same stats as a combat knife. So on to the next page, it's how to build Space Marine Scouts. We've got the two sprues here that you can see, and then flick it over. It's got all the build options really. It's pretty simple. You get 5 sets of legs and 5 torsos, so you just stick whichever torsos on whichever leg you want. And then it gives you the arm options. It takes you through all the options. There's an option for your Scout Sergeant with a chainsword and a bolt pistol, and also a heavy bolter scout there. And you can build one with a bolt gun or you can build one with a shotgun. It covers all the bases really. And then on to the last page, it talks about bolt pistol and combat knife scout. And then it shows you a squad of assembled scouts there. So in this squad they've got one bolt gun, one shotgun, a combat knife and a pistol, and a chainsword and a pistol sergeant, and a heavy bolter. So they've built all the variants just in that one squad there. Very, very nice. On to the next page, it's how to paint our scouts. Unsurprisingly, because of course these magazines typically always go in the same order, provided they've got a painting guide for you. Sometimes of course you don't get a model with issue, so they know how to build section. It's a nice little paint job they do on these scouts, to be fair. Flicking through the pages, it talks about painting the bionic eye and stuff in the metallic colours, picking out various areas of flesh with the Bugman's Glow, and Mephiston Red, Retributor Armour, all the paints we've received over the course. But then it also talks about some finer details. So paint a thin line of red on the upper edges of the lenses to make them look like the light's reflecting off them. So that's on the bionic eye bit there. And then it's an alright painted model at the end. There's some fine details painted. There's some areas that could use some more attention. I'm sure we'll come back to them in future issues. The skin looks a bit flat, to be honest. But yeah, if they come back to that in future issues, that'll be a lovely model at the end of it. And then on the final page there for the painting section, it talks about painting the extra weapons, the different weapon options. So you get a pretty in-depth painting guide there, to be fair. Whilst you only see one model, the Scout Sergeant with the bolter and chainsword, bolt pistol and chainsword, you only see that model fully painted. The fact that they do show you still how to paint the other weapons is really nice. I think it's a nice touch there. So onto the rules section of this. The Wargear options. It talks us through what I mentioned at the start of the video, that certain units can pick certain different Wargear. And in the case of the Scout, they can take an Astartes shotgun, a bolt pistol, bolt gun, heavy bolter, combat knife, frag grenade and crack grenade. And it tells you on the data sheet, the data slate. Are they called data slates or data sheets? I can't remember. For a while they were called data slates, but I feel like the data sheets now. It tells you on the data sheet how many of each weapon can be taken. But before we get to that, let's talk about the Wargear options. So the bolt gun is a default weapon for the Space Marine Scouts. It has a good range and has rapid fire rule. Whereas compared to the Astartes shotgun, that can be fired on the move. So it has a shorter range of 12 inches, but you get 2 shots and you can advance and shoot it as well. It also mentions all the other weapons we've already spoken about. So, onto the stats for the Scout Squad. I'm not going to go through them completely, but I'll just pick out a few key stats here. So the weapon skill and ballistic skill of the Scout is comparable to a Space Marine. It's a 3+ of each. Strength and toughness, same as a Space Marine. I'm sure we all know what that is by now. The leadership value is, I think it's the same as a Space Marine. That is 8 and 9, although I could be wrong there. I think they're 9 for the Sergeant and 8 for the Standard Scout. And then the save is 4+ save. The unit contains 1 Scout Sergeant and 4 Scouts. Each model is armed with a bolt gun, bolt pistol, frag grenades and crack grenades. And then it gives you the weapon options there. But then below that we've got the Wargear options. So this is where it tells us exactly how to pick or how we can pick the various bits of Wargear we get. So any model may replace his bolt gun with an Astartes shotgun or a combat knife. So if your battlefield tactics, if you think you're going to want to use your Scouts to get up in your opponent's faces and take them on in combat, then maybe think about giving them the combat knife. But unfortunately, that means you've only got the relatively short range bolt pistol, 12-inch weapon with only 1 shot. You've only got that to use in the shooting phase. Whereas if you want to get up in the faces and still have some firepower, it might be better to choose the shotgun, which has, again, a relatively short range of 12 inches, but you get 2 shots and you can advance and shoot that weapon as well. And 1 Scout may replace his bolt gun with a heavy bolter. So in the case of taking a shotgun or a combat knife, you can do that with all the Scouts, but you can only do it with 1 Scout, replace his bolt gun with a bolter, heavy bolter. Is it worth doing? Well, it's a heavy weapon, so if you move, you're going to suffer a penalty to shoot it. So it might be worth maybe not taking the heavy bolter. What I'll probably end up doing with the heavy bolter is using it in my orcs and using it as a big shooter rather than a heavy bolter. The heavy bolter, interestingly, has the same stat line, if memory serves, as a big shooter. So it's a 36-inch range weapon, or almost the same stat line. There's a reason the heavy shooter is better. I'll get to that shortly. The strength is 5, AP is -1, and the damage is 1. So it sounds pretty similar to the big shooter there to me. However, there's a big difference. The big shooter for orcs is assault 3, whereas the heavy bolter for the Space Marines is heavy 3, meaning you can't, when you move and shoot that weapon, you suffer a penalty to hit roll. Granted, you're still going to be shooting, you're still going to be hitting on a lower dice roll than the orcs will hit on, but you do, it's something to bear in mind, you'll suffer a penalty to that hit roll. Another interesting rule is in the abilities section here. They've got the "and they shall know no fear" rule, same as the Space Marines, and the Codex Discipline. The concealed positions is their unique rule. Or not necessarily unique, but it's a rule that's picked out on their data profile that I've not seen on anyone else's so far. When you set up this unit during deployment, it can be set up anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches from the enemy deployment zone. Very useful indeed. Flicking over to the next page, From the Shadows. So we've got a scenario here where, using the 2 battle mats, as we have been doing for a while, we're using the smallest army we have done in absolutely ages. What they want you to do in this one, the scenario is basically that there's some tech that needs switching off, I think. Place 5 objective markers in the positions shown on the battle map. The Space Marine Scouts can collect objective markers by moving into contact with them. Remove each marker from the battlefield when it is collected. A unit of Space Marine Scouts has been sent deep behind enemy lines. Their mission is to extract sensitive information from broken and discarded computer terminals. Ensure the Death Guard don't get their hands on the vital code ciphers for the defence network. So, there's 5 objective markers, as I said, and these represent computers and just computing units, basically. And it tells you exactly how to set them up on the battlefield, as you'll see. And these objective markers are handily on the back page here, so we can cut them out, more objective markers to use in our games. The scouts have to get to these objective markers before the Poxwalkers do, and the Plague Champion. And, excuse me, the way the Death Guard army is set up, they've got 4 units of 3 Poxwalkers. So that's 12 Poxwalkers in total, 1 Plague Champion. That's 13 models in total for the Death Guard, and the Space Marines get 1 unit of 5 Scouts. It doesn't say they can split up into, it's not 5 units of 1 Scout, it's 1 unit of 5 Scouts, so they have to maintain unit coherency. So it's interesting there whether you want to take the guns, whether you want to take the combat knives and take on the Poxwalkers in close combat. Personally, I'd take the guns, probably the shotguns. For this particular mission, that's the problem. You've got to think about missions in the future, whether you want to take the shotguns or the bolters. So for this particular mission, I'd definitely take the shotguns, because Poxwalkers don't have any ranged weapons. So you can take out the Poxwalkers from distance and then obtain the objective that they were on. The deployment, though, first of all, the Death Guard player deploys their units so that each model is touching an objective marker. What I'd probably do as a Death Guard player there is put the Plague Champion on the middle marker and put the 4 units of 3 Poxwalkers on one of the other markers. You could actually, and a different way to approach it could be to put all your Poxwalkers and your Plague Champion on the centre marker, and then they can move to whichever marker the Scouts are going for first. So, the different options for tactical deployment are there for you. The Space Marine Scouts then deploy using their concealed positions rule, which we've just read from the data sheet. The Space Marine player takes their first turn, or takes the first turn rather. Interestingly, though, with the concealed position rule, it says in the data sheet, if I get back to the right page, I'll read it again for you. It says, when you set up the unit during deployment zone, it can be set up anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches from the enemy deployment zone. Now, the enemy doesn't have a deployment zone. It has deployment positions because it's the objective markers, but they're not really deployment zones. So, technically, you could set up anywhere on this battlefield, although you could treat them as deployment zones. They are marked in green on this diagram, on this picture that it shows us here in the magazine. But I'd say they're not really deployment zones, they're just deployment positions. A deployment zone to me is a marked out area on the edge of the page, not necessarily on the edge, but it could be in the middle, it could be a triangular shape or something like that coming from one of the edges. So it's a bit dubious as to whether they are deployment zones to me. I guess they're marked out in green, so you should really treat them as deployment zones. But if it has to be more than 9 inches, then you're really limited to where you can deploy. You have to deploy on one of the edges that's 11 inches away from the first marker. So it could be tricky as a scout player, or it could be really easy depending on how you interpret that. Is that a deployment zone? Is it not? It leaves it open to interpretation, I'd say. Anyway, onto the victory conditions. The Space Marine player is victorious if they collect 3 objective markers. Either player can win the game by eliminating all enemy units. The Death Guard player is victorious if they prevent the Space Marine player from collecting 3 objective markers. Pretty straightforward, really. There's no chance of a draw in here either. The game lasts for 5 battle rounds. On to the next issue. We're getting some Death Guard reinforcements, as I said on the previous episode. So we are getting a fetid bloat drone, which is another vehicle for the Death Guard. It's a sort of hovering demon engine of doom. It's got the plague thingy, cannon thingies. We've seen them on one of the Terminators we've already got, and I think there is a Plague Marine that carries one of these as well, but I can't. Oh no, it's one of the characters we've seen before. I can't remember the name of the character now. But yeah, there's more, disgusting weaponry from the Death Guard here in use. We also get another Lord of Contagion, and 4 Plague Marines. Then the week after, we're getting for the Space Marines another vehicle. It's the Land Speeder. Very exciting stuff. I've never built or painted a Land Speeder. I've been in this hobby on and off. Been in this hobby about 10 years at least. Was into it when I was a kid. Got back into it a couple of years ago. But I've never built and painted a Land Speeder because it's only really recently that I've started collecting Space Marine forces. I say recently, I mean this time round really in the hobby. And the Land Speeder kit's never really appealed to me. But it should be a really fast vehicle, because it's a hover vehicle. Theoretically, anyway. It'll be at least as fast as the Space Marine bikes, I imagine. I would have thought at least 2 inches faster, so you could probably cover quite a lot of that relatively small battlefield with that Land Speeder in 1 or 2 turns. Get from corner to corner. Anyway, we'll leave it there for now, guys. Thanks very much for watching. No, before I go, I forgot to do it last week. If you're looking for more painting and building guides and tips, make sure you check out the Hobby Corner. I completely forgot to mention it last week. What I might do is do a little bit now and put it in at the start. No, I'll leave it at the end. So if you got this far, you'll know to go and check out the Hobby Corner. Plenty of great building and painting tips there. I can't remember the last one of his videos that I watched. It was a Death Guard one, I think. It was a Rhino, I think. I watched the Death Guard Rhino one. He's done some... Use the sort of chaosy bits. Really interestingly, he's put like a loop on the front of it, which gives it a really unique look. The way he's built it, which is really nice. So I'll leave it there for now, guys. Check out the Hobby Corner. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the battlefield.